Alright. Hello, my name is Karen Lee, and I would like to tell you the story of Belle, the last meal of Gee's Bend. When I visit my grandmother, who lives in the lovely southern state of Alabama, she likes to tell me these in-depth stories about our history. But one time in particular, I visited her and she didn't want to tell me a story. She told me, Karen, I want to take you somewhere. And she did. She took me to a small community near where she grew up called Gee's Bend. I guess I really shouldn't call it small. It's actually become quite famous in the recent years for its quilts. The quilts were first shown in the Heath Museum of Arts and at least 11 other museums across the nation. Not only that, but the quilts have been reviewed by the New York Times art critic and have been featured on U.S. postal stamps. Gee's Bend has also had a famous visitor. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself came to speak there. You see, the people of Gee's Bend were often looked down upon by society because most of them were poor farmers. But Dr. King came to them on a late rainy winter night in 1965 and told them, I came over here to Gee's Bend to tell you, you are somebody. And from that speech alone, the Gee's Benders were very encouraged. They were so encouraged, they were ready to register to vote. But I'll come back to that in a second. Gee's Bend has also had a famous resident. This person goes by the name of Belle. Well, Belle isn't really a person. Maybe an animal, maybe a farm animal. Well, Belle is a mule, but that doesn't make her any less important. Belle's story really starts in the midst of the civil rights movement. Remember how I was telling you about Dr. King and how encouraged the Gee's Benders were? That's right. They are ready to register to vote. So they decided that they would take a special day from their work schedule and load up their ferry full of people, as many as they could fit, and they would take the ferry to Camden to the courthouse and register their names to vote. But when some of the white people in Camden heard about it, they were absolutely livid. They were going to do everything in their power to put a stop to it. So you know what they did? They shut down the ferry. And shutting down the ferry for the Gee's Benders was like cutting off their connection to the outside world. And when the sheriff from Camden was asked about it, he told the press, we didn't shut down the ferry because they were Black. We shut it down because they forgot they were Black. Well, that pinned into their efforts to vote. Well, maybe not entirely. It just made things extra difficult. My grandmother told me that without using the ferry, going around the river would be 30 whole miles. And I actually stood on that exact same riverbank. And looking around, that is a long ways to go. But the Gee's Benders were determined people, and they were going to use the resources that they had to do what they needed to do. And the resources that they had were wagons and mules. So they took another special day from their work schedule and loaded up their wagon beds full of people and families, attached their mules to it, and the mules pulled them the 30 miles around the river. And one of those mules was in fact Belle. And yes, the people of Gee's Bend did get what they wanted. They did register, but not everything was dandy after that. There are consequences. You see, most of the people who registered their names lost their jobs. And the Gee's Benders, already being poor, can afford a situation like this. So this is what really sparked them to sell their quilts, and this is what makes them as famous as they are today. And after that situation, people of Gee's Bend worked with a new kind of mindset and a new kind of determination, especially after Dr. King's visit and how much of an encouragement he had been. But after 3 or so years and marking when he had come, they all got terrible news. Dr. King had been assassinated in Tennessee, and they were all understandably devastated. Dr. King had been one of their main motivators during the hard times. But the Gee's Benders soon got other news. A representative from Dr. King's family contacted them and told them that Dr. King wanted one of their mules to pull his casket during the funeral procession. Not only did Dr. King want a mule, Dr. King wanted his casket to be put on a wagon and pulled just like the wagons that the mules had pulled to Camden. And you might be thinking, Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Nobel Prize winner, wanted mules and wagons for his funeral? That's right. Dr. King didn't want anything extravagant. He wanted the mules because they weren't fancy, but they were strong and they held steady, just like the G's Benders. And as Belle was being taken to Atlanta, where the funeral would be held, yes, people tried to put a stop to her trip, but she got there nonetheless. And when she did, she was attached to the wagon, which held Dr. King's casket, and she pulled it the 4 miles of the procession, patiently. And as she did that, many hands reached out to touch her, just like many hands that reached out to Dr. King for help. But they were both alike, and they were strong, and they kept going. And when Belle returned to G's Bend, she had become quite the celebrity. And as Belle aged there, Belle got to do whatever she wanted, including eating out of anybody's garden that she wanted. She got to eat all the collard greens and all the turnip greens and all the beans and cornbread. Well, maybe not beans and cornbread. That's what I like. But nonetheless, Belle got to do what she wanted because she had seen history and been a part of history. And that's the story my grandmother told me about Belle, the last mule of G's Bend. And if you would like to see a picture of Belle during the funeral procession, here it is. Thank you.
Wow. So now you see why 2 mules for Sister Sarah came to mind. But these 2 mules were a lot more important because they were for Martin Luther King. Imagine Martin Luther King, even before he died, he was thinking about what he was going to do. What would he want to show? What kind of an example he wanted to leave after he had passed. And he had asked for a mule to pull his casket. How wonderful, how inspiring. And Dr. Martin Luther King lives on. That's why he lives on, even today, and will continue to live on as an example. Now we have, thank you, Karen, for that lovely story.